Son abandoned elderly parents by the river, but what happened next shocked everyone. Dorothy held her husband's hand as she watched the boat drift away. Her legs trembled, but she kept a smile on her face, waving at the figure growing smaller on the horizon. Beside her, Harold remained silent, his lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes fixed on the muddy water reflecting the grey afternoon sky. "He'll be back soon, Harold. Michael just went to get something. You'll see," said Dorothy, her voice filled with a hope that seemed too forced. The boat disappeared completely around a bend in the river. The engine grew increasingly distant until only the sound of wind in the trees and the gentle lapping of waves on the shore remained. Dorothy waited. Harold didn't move. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. The afternoon was growing colder. "Harold, maybe we should find a place to sit," suggested Dorothy, looking around. "My legs are tired from the trip." "He's not coming back," said Harold finally. His voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. "Don't talk like that. Of course he's coming back. He's our son. Look around, Dorothy. He left us here with 2 old suitcases and didn't even wait to see if we were okay. He's not coming back." Dorothy felt her chest tighten. She looked at the 2 suitcases at her feet, one brown with cracked leather, the other dark green with a rusty clasp. They were the same suitcases they had used so many years ago when they moved to the big city. Inside them was everything they still owned: old clothes, some medicine, a wedding photo, and Dorothy's Bible. "It must have been a misunderstanding," she insisted. "Michael was in such a hurry this morning. Maybe he forgot to explain properly what he was going to do. He wouldn't leave us here on purpose." Harold turned to his wife. For the first time in decades, Dorothy saw tears in her husband's eyes. But they didn't fall. Harold blinked hard and looked away. 43 years, Dorothy. 43 years we dedicated our lives to that boy. I worked until my bones ached. You washed, cooked, sewed, and in the end, he brings us here and leaves." "Harold, please." "He said it was an outing, remember? He said he wanted to show us a beautiful place before we got too old to travel, and we believed him. I believed him." Harold's voice broke on the last word. He turned his back, his shoulders tense under the yellow shirt Dorothy had ironed so carefully the night before. She approached, placing her hand on his arm. "We need to find help," she said softly. "It's starting to get cold, and we have nowhere to stay." Harold took a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice had regained its firmness, but there was something hard in it, something Dorothy didn't fully recognize. "I won't ask anyone for help. I've been humiliated enough for one day. Harold, be reasonable. We don't know this place." "We don't. We have no money, no documents. He took everything." "I know what he took," Harold replied dryly. Dorothy looked around more carefully for the first time. They were on a riverbank, but it wasn't a completely isolated place. Further ahead, maybe 200 yards upstream, she could see some simple houses, wooden buildings with zinc roofs. There was a small village there. "Come on," she said, picking up the lighter suitcase. "Let's go to those houses. Someone might help us." "Dorothy." "Harold, I'm not going to stand here waiting for nightfall. If you don't want to ask for help, that's fine, but we can at least ask if there's a place to stay. We can pay with work if we have to." Harold hesitated. His pride fought against necessity. Finally, he picked up the heavy suitcase and began to walk, his steps slow but determined. Dorothy walked beside him, praying quietly. The walk to the village seemed longer than it actually was. The ground was uneven, full of stones and exposed roots. Dorothy stumbled twice, but Harold held her arm, preventing her from falling. When they finally reached the first houses, the sun was already low on the horizon. The village was smaller than Dorothy had imagined, maybe 10 or 12 houses in total, all simple, some with small vegetable gardens in the back. There was a larger shed, probably used to store nets and fishing gear. The smell of fish and the river was everywhere. Some people watched them from windows and porches. Dorothy smiled and waved, but no one returned the gesture. The looks were cautious, distrustful. She felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. "Good afternoon," said Dorothy, addressing a woman who was sweeping the porch of a house. "Sorry to bother you. We were looking for—" The woman went inside without answering, closing the door behind her. Dorothy was left with the words stuck in her throat. "I told you," murmured Harold. They continued walking. At the third house, an old man sitting in a rocking chair watched them with curiosity. Dorothy gathered courage to try again. "Good afternoon, sir. We need some help. Is there any place here where we can stay? We can pay with work." The man didn't answer immediately. His small watery eyes studied the couple from head to toe. Finally, he spat on the ground and pointed to a slightly larger house at the end of the street. "Look for Miss Betty. She runs an inn, but I don't know if she'll want to take in outsiders." "Thank you, sir," said Dorothy, relieved to at least have gotten a response. The indicated house was indeed larger than the others, with 2 floors and a wide porch. There was a faded sign in front, "Gentle River Inn." Dorothy climbed the wooden steps, which creaked under her feet, and knocked on the door. No one answered. She knocked again, harder this time. "Who is it?" came a hoarse voice from inside. "Good afternoon. We need a place to stay. The gentleman down there said you run an inn." The door opened, revealing a woman of about 60, maybe a little older. She was short and sturdy, with graying hair tied in a loose bun. Her eyes were dark and penetrating, and there was a hardness in her face that spoke of a difficult life. "I don't have any rooms available," she said, starting to close the door. "Please." Dorothy put her hand on the door, preventing it from closing. "We can sleep anywhere. We can pay with work. My husband is strong. He can do repairs, carry things. I can cook, clean, wash clothes. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." The woman, Miss Betty, looked at Harold, who remained a few steps back, the heavy suitcase still in his hand. "Where are you from?" "From Chicago," Dorothy replied quickly. "Our son. He brought us here by boat and—" "There was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." Miss Betty crossed her arms. "You were dumped here, is that it?" Dorothy opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come out. The truth was too cruel to be said aloud. "Look, I don't meddle in other people's lives," said Miss Betty after a long silence. "But I'm not a fool either. You're not the first old folks to show up here dumped by your family. It happens more than you think." "We don't want charity," said Harold, finally speaking. "We work. We've always worked." Miss Betty studied the two for another moment. Then, with a heavy sigh, she opened the door completely. "There's a small room in the back. Small, but it has a bed and it's clean. You can stay there for now. In return you," she said to Harold, "will help me with the repairs around the house. There's a lot of broken stuff here. And you," she looked at Dorothy, "can help me in the kitchen and with cleaning. Agreed?" "Agreed," said Dorothy and Harold at the same time. "Then come in quickly before I change my mind." The room was indeed small. It barely fit the narrow double bed, an old wardrobe, and a small table with a basin for washing up. But it was clean, as Miss Betty had promised, and had a small window that looked out to the back of the house where the river could be seen through the trees. Dorothy sat on the bed, feeling the full weight of the day fall on her shoulders. Harold closed the door and stood still, looking at the old wooden floor. "What are we going to do, Harold?" asked Dorothy, her voice finally breaking. "I don't know," he replied honestly, "but I won't beg for our son to want us back. That I won't do. He's our only son. We can't just—" "He abandoned us, Dorothy. He planned this. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. He chose to bring us here and leave us." Tears finally began to fall down Dorothy's face. She wiped them quickly, but more came. Harold sat beside her, and for the first time in many years held her tight. "We'll be okay," he said without much conviction. "We've always managed." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in that small, strange room as the sun set outside and the riverside village prepared for the night. In Chicago, Michael Williams parked the car in his garage and sat for a few minutes, his hands still on the wheel. The boat trip, and then the long drive back, had been exhausting, but it wasn't physical fatigue that made him hesitate to go inside. "Are you going to stay there all day?" His wife Jennifer's voice came from the door connecting the garage to the house. She stood with her arms crossed, an impatient expression on her face. Michael got out of the car, grabbing the small bag he had taken on the trip. "It's done," he said without looking at her. "And were they okay? Didn't make a scene?" My mother cried a little. My father, he didn't say anything. He didn't. Just kept looking at me. Jennifer went into the house and Michael followed her. The house was spacious, newly renovated with all the latest details Jennifer had insisted on having: new floors, a modern kitchen, expensive furniture, everything they had sacrificed Michael's parents for. "You did the right thing," said Jennifer, pouring herself a glass of water. "They're old. They need a quiet place. Here in the city, they were sad in that little room. Now they have the river, nature, fresh air. I left them in a village they don't know, without money, without documents," said Michael, his voice low. "You left money with that woman at the inn, didn't you? Said it was to take care of them for a few months." "I did, but—" "No buts, Michael. We had no choice. We can't support your mother and father and still make the renovation payments. You know that. And they would have understood eventually." "Daddy," a cheerful little voice came from the hallway. Emma, the couple's 5-year-old daughter, ran to Michael and threw herself into his arms. "Where are Grandma and Grandpa? Did you bring them?" Michael felt his chest tighten. He hugged his daughter, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo in her hair. "They stayed in a beautiful place, Princess, a place with a river and lots of trees." "But when are they coming back? Grandma was going to teach me how to make a cake." They're going to stay there for a while." "How long?" "I don't know, Emma. Can I go visit them?" Michael didn't know what to say. He looked at Jennifer, who quickly changed the subject, taking Emma to her room. Alone in the newly renovated living room, Michael sat on the new sofa and buried his face in his hands. He remembered perfectly the look in his father's eyes as the boat began to pull away. There was no anger there, no surprise, just a deep, resigned sadness. As if Harold had been waiting for that his whole life, and maybe he had. Michael had never been the son his father wanted. Harold was a tough man of few words, who believed hard work was the answer to everything. Michael had been different, more interested in studying, in having a more comfortable life. They had never truly understood each other, but did that justify what he had done? Michael shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away. Jennifer was right. They had no choice. The house needed to be renovated. They had bills to pay. Emma needed school, clothes, everything. His parents were a burden they could no longer carry. That's what he kept telling himself, over and over. But for some reason, the words sounded increasingly hollow. Back in the village, Dorothy and Harold had spent a restless night. The mattress was hard, the pillow thin, and the sounds of the night in the village were strange and unsettling. Cries of nocturnal animals, the constant murmur of the river, creaking wooden footsteps in other rooms of the inn. When the sun finally rose, Dorothy had been awake for hours. She got up carefully so as not to wake Harold, who had finally managed to sleep in the early morning hours, and left the room. The inn's kitchen was empty, but there was a pot of coffee on the wood stove. Dorothy poured herself a mug and went out to the porch. The river was calm, reflecting the first colors of dawn. It was beautiful, she had to admit, but the beauty of the place didn't erase the pain in her chest. "You're up early," said Miss Betty, appearing on the porch with her own mug of coffee. "I couldn't sleep very well. The first night in a strange place is never easy, and I doubt it's just because of the new bed." Dorothy smiled sadly. Miss Betty sat in a chair beside her. "How many children do you have?" asked Miss Betty. "Just one, Michael." "And he just left you here?" Dorothy didn't answer immediately. How to explain what had happened? How to put into words the feeling of being left behind by the only son she had raised with so much love and sacrifice? "He said it was an outing," she said finally, "that he wanted to show us a special place. We came by boat. It was a long trip. When we got here, he said he needed to get something and would be right back, and then he left and didn't return." "And you still think it was a misunderstanding?" "I want to believe that." Miss Betty took a sip of coffee, her eyes fixed on the river. "I've seen a lot in this life," she said, "and one thing I've learned is that we can't force people to want us, not even our children, no matter how much it hurts." "Do you have children?" Miss Betty was silent for a moment. I did, a long time ago. There was something in her tone that discouraged Dorothy from asking more. They sat in silence, drinking coffee and watching the river wake up. Harold appeared shortly after, already dressed and with a determined expression on his face. "Where are the tools?" he asked Miss Betty. "You said you had things to fix. You haven't had breakfast yet. I'll eat later. I want to work." Miss Betty studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "In the shed out back. There are hammers, saws, nails, all old, but they'll do. You can start by fixing the chicken coop fence. It's falling apart." Harold nodded and left without another word. Dorothy watched him go, worried. "He needs to keep busy," she said to Miss Betty. "If he stays still, he'll start thinking, and thinking will hurt him." "I understand. Come, let's prepare breakfast. I have 2 more guests, fishermen who stay here during the week. They'll be down soon and will be hungry." Dorothy followed Miss Betty back to the kitchen. It was a simple kitchen with a wood stove, a large wooden table, and shelves full of jars and pots. But it was clean and organized. "Do you know how to make bread?" asked Miss Betty. "Yes, I used to make it every day at home." "I mean at my son's house." "Then today you'll make the bread. The flour is in that cabinet, yeast too, make plenty, the fishermen eat a lot." Dorothy began to work, her hands finding a familiar rhythm in the dough. Making bread always calmed her. There was something meditative about the process of kneading, of feeling the dough change texture under her hands. The 2 fishermen came down for coffee shortly after. They were middle-aged men, sunburned, with calloused hands and simple clothes. They greeted Dorothy with nods but asked no questions. "Did Miss Betty get a helper?" asked one of them, filling his plate with scrambled eggs and boiled cassava. "Temporarily," replied Miss Betty, offering no further explanation. The day passed in work. Dorothy helped in the kitchen, washed clothes by hand in the backyard basin, swept the floor of the inn. They were familiar tasks, things she had done her whole life. But there was a difference now. Before, she did these things out of love, by choice. Now she did them because she had no other option. Harold worked non-stop on the fence, then on the roof of a small shed that was leaking, then on a door that wouldn't close properly. He barely spoke during lunch, eating quickly before returning to work. In the afternoon, when Dorothy was hanging clothes on the line, she noticed a man watching Harold from a distance. He was an older gentleman she had seen in the village the night before. He had a fixed gaze, as if trying to remember something. Dorothy kept watching, a strange feeling growing in her stomach. The man slowly approached Harold, who was crouched fixing a loose step on the porch stairs. "Harold Thompson?" asked the man, his voice full of uncertainty. Harold looked up sharply, his face turned pale. "You're mistaking me for someone else," he said quickly, returning to his work. "No, I'm not. I recognize you. You're old Edward's son, aren't you? You lived here many years ago." "I said you're confusing people." "Harold Thompson," repeated the man, firmer now. "You ran away from here over 40 years ago, after that fight with your father over the city girl. Everyone here remembers." Dorothy dropped the clothing she was holding. She looked at her husband, who kept his head down, pretending to be focused on the step. "Harold," she called, her voice trembling. "What is he talking about?" Harold didn't answer. The other man continued speaking, his voice now filled with curiosity and a touch of malice. "So you came back, after all these years, and you brought her back, that city girl." He looked at Dorothy with interest. "You're the reason he abandoned his family." "I didn't abandon anyone," said Harold, standing up abruptly. "I was thrown out. There's a difference." "Harold, what is he talking about?" Dorothy approached, her heart pounding. "Are you from here? From this village?" "Dorothy, you brought me here and never told me you had lived here before. Harold, why?" "Because I didn't want to remember," exploded Harold, his voice loud and full of pain. "Because this place means nothing to me. Because I was thrown out of here by my own family when I was 20 and never came back." The man gave a short laugh. "Well, seems his son did the same thing to him. What goes around comes around, as they say." "Shut up!" shouted Harold. "Harold!" Dorothy grabbed his arm, frightened. She had never seen her husband so upset. The other man walked away, still smiling unpleasantly. "Welcome back, Harold. The village has heard you're here. It'll be interesting to see how they welcome the prodigal son." He left, leaving Harold and Dorothy alone on the porch. Harold was trembling, his fists clenched. 43 years, Harold," said Dorothy, her voice low but full of emotion. 43 years married, and you never told me you were from here. Because it didn't matter. It didn't matter? Our son left us in the place where you grew up, where you have history, where you were thrown out by your family, and you think it doesn't matter? I didn't know he was going to bring us here. But you recognized the place when we arrived, didn't you? That's why you were so quiet. That's why you didn't want to look for help." Harold didn't deny it. He sat down on the steps, suddenly looking much older and more tired. "When I ran away from here with you, I swore I would never come back," he said. "I swore that this place, these people, my father, all of it would stay in the past. And it did. All these years I managed not to think about it, not to remember." "But now it's back," said Dorothy, sitting down beside him, "and I deserve to know the truth. All of it." Harold remained silent for a long time. Dorothy waited, her hands clasped in her lap. Finally, he began to speak. "My father owned a small fleet of fishing boats. He wasn't rich, but we had enough. He wanted me to take over the business, to marry a girl from this riverside village, to continue the family tradition. But I didn't want that. I wanted something different. And then you met me. I had gone to Chicago to sell fish at the market. That's where I saw you, working in that fabric store. You were so beautiful, so different from everything I knew. We started talking, then meeting whenever I went to the city. I fell in love with you." Dorothy remembered those days. She was 18, Harold was 20. He was shy but kind, hard-working and honest. She had fallen in love too. "When I told my father I wanted to marry you, he was furious," Harold continued. "He said you weren't from our world, that you knew nothing about life in the village, that you would pull me away from the family. We fought. We fought a lot. And then he gave me an ultimatum. Either I forgot you and married the girl he had chosen for me, or I was thrown out of the family. And you chose me. I chose you. I took what I had, came to get you in Chicago, and we ran away. We got married in a small church, far from here. We started a new life. And I never spoke to my father again. I never came back here. Harold, why did you never tell me this? Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of being thrown out. Ashamed of not fighting more for my family. Ashamed of choosing love over duty. And after Michael was born, I swore I would raise him differently. That I would be firm with him. That I would teach him to be strong, not to be weak like I was. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video, and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. You weren't weak, Harold. You were brave. It doesn't seem that way now, does it? I was thrown out by my father, and now I've been abandoned by my son. Maybe I deserved it. Don't talk like that. It's the truth, Dorothy. I raised Michael with so much rigidity, so much harshness. I thought I was preparing him for the world, but I was only pushing him away from me, just like my father did with me. Dorothy took her husband's hand, squeezing it. We can't change the past, she said, but we're still here together, and we'll find a way to move forward. Harold looked at her, his eyes red. How are you so strong? Because I have you, and because I have faith. But even as she said these words, Dorothy felt a crack in her own faith. For the first time in her life, she wondered if God was really watching over them, or if they were completely alone. The news that Harold had returned spread through the village like wildfire. The next day, people started passing by the inn more often, looking curiously at the couple. Some whispered among themselves, others were more direct in their comments. "Is that really Harold Thompson?" an elderly woman asked Miss Betty while Dorothy swept the porch. "Yes. After all these years, and he came with his wife, the one who caused all that trouble." "We don't judge guests here, Mrs. Miller," Miss Betty said firmly. "Of course not. But it's interesting, don't you think? He ran away from here because of her, and now he's back. I wonder if old Edward is turning in his grave." Dorothy felt her hands tighten around the broom handle. She wanted to defend Harold, to say something, but didn't know what. Miss Betty noticed her discomfort. "Mrs. Miller, If there's nothing else, I have work to do." The woman left, but others came. The whole riverside village seemed fascinated by Harold's return, and with each visit, each comment, each judgmental look, Dorothy felt the weight of the situation grow. Harold dealt with it the only way he knew how, by working. He fixed everything, Ms. Betty pointed out, and then looked for more things to repair. He barely spoke, barely ate. At night he fell into bed exhausted, but Dorothy heard him wake up in the middle of the night, breathing heavily. A week passed, then 2. The village routine began to feel familiar. Dorothy woke up early, made coffee, prepared bread, cleaned, cooked. Harold worked. They spoke little. The revelation about Harold's past had created a distance between them, an uncomfortable silence full of unasked questions and unanswered replies. It was on one of these mornings that dark clouds began to gather over the village. Dorothy was in the backyard hanging clothes when she felt the first raindrops. The wind had picked up, bringing a damp, heavy smell. "It's going to rain hard," Miss Betty said, appearing beside her. "Let's gather everything and close the windows tight." The rain started slowly, but soon turned into a storm. The wind howled, making the whole house shake. The rain beat on the roof so hard you could barely hear anything else. "Is this normal?" Dorothy asked, worried. "In the rainy season, yes, but this is stronger than usual." Hours passed, and the rain didn't let up. On the contrary, it only got worse. Harold came in soaked. He had been in the shed, making sure everything was secure. "The river is rising," he said. "Too fast." Miss Betty went to the window. Even through the curtain of rain, you could see that the river, which normally stayed well below the bank, was now dangerously high. "We have to warn the others," she said. "If it keeps rising like this, it'll flood the lower houses." Harold didn't hesitate. He grabbed an old raincoat and went out into the storm. Dorothy saw him knocking on the neighbors' doors, shouting to be heard over the noise of the rain. Some people came out, others shut their doors in his face. Night fell, but the rain didn't stop. The river had overflowed its banks and water began to invade the village streets. People started gathering in the houses on higher ground, including Miss Betty's inn. Dorothy and Miss Betty made coffee and handed out blankets. There were about 20 people in the house now, all wet, frightened, some with crying children. "I've never seen the river rise so fast," said one of the fishermen, "and I've lived here for 40 years. "Where are Joe and Mary?" someone asked. "Their house is the lowest. Did they get out?" There was a tense silence. Nobody knew. Harold was near the window, looking out into the darkness. The lower houses already had knee-deep water. It was impossible to see much through the rain, but every now and then lightning lit up the scene, showing the destruction the flood was causing. "There's someone down there," Harold said suddenly. "In the river, it's a child." Everyone ran to the window. Another lightning bolt lit up the scene, and they could see a canoe had broken loose from its moorings and was being carried by the current. And inside it, clinging to the sides, was a child. "It's Joe's granddaughter," someone shouted. "My God, she must have gotten into the canoe and it came loose. Someone has to do something. You can't swim in that current. It's suicide." But Harold was already moving. He grabbed a rope hanging near the door and ran out into the storm. Dorothy screamed his name, trying to follow him, but Miss Betty held her back. "Let him go. He knows what he's doing. He grew up on this river." Harold ran along the bank, the rope in his hand, his eyes fixed on the canoe being rapidly carried by the current. The child was screaming, but her cries could barely be heard over the noise of the storm. He had only one chance. There was a tree up ahead, half fallen into the river, that the canoe would pass very close to. If he could get there first, tie the rope to the tree and jump into the water at the right moment. Harold ran like he hadn't run in years. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he didn't stop. He reached the tree just seconds before the canoe. Quickly he tied the rope to a sturdy branch and fastened the other end around his waist. And then he threw himself into the river. The current caught him immediately, pulling him with brutal force. Harold fought against the water, swimming with all his might toward the canoe. He could see the child's face now, a girl of about 6 or 7, her eyes wide with terror. His hands touched the side of the canoe. He clung to it, pulling himself closer. The girl screamed, clinging to him. "Hold on to me!" Harold shouted. "Hold on tight!" The girl hugged him tightly, her small hands locking around his neck. Harold used his remaining strength to turn onto his back, keeping the girl's head above water, and began pulling on the rope. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. With every pull on the rope, the current tried to tear the girl from his arms. His muscles screamed. His heart beat so hard it felt like it would explode. But he didn't let go. He wouldn't let go. Slowly, painfully, he managed to reach the tree. Hands grabbed him. Other men had arrived and were pulling on the rope, helping bring them back to the bank. Finally, Harold felt solid ground under his feet. He staggered out of the water, still holding the girl. People rushed to them, wrapping the child in blankets, checking if she was okay. Harold fell to his knees, coughing up water, shaking from cold and exhaustion. Dorothy was by his side instantly, putting a blanket over his shoulders, holding his face in her hands. "Are you okay? Harold, are you okay?" He nodded, unable to speak yet. The girl was crying, but she was alive. She was okay. "You saved my granddaughter," an old man said, his face wet with rain and tears. It was Joe. "You saved my Lily." Harold finally found his voice. "Is she okay?" "She is, thanks to you." Other residents approached. The same man who had recognized Harold days before was there, but now his look was different. There was no more malice, only respect. "You're a hero, Harold," he said. "You could have drowned in that current." "I didn't think about that," Harold said honestly. "I just saw the girl needed help." They helped him back to the Gentle River Inn. The storm was finally beginning to subside. The river, having reached its peak, was slowly starting to recede. At the inn, Dorothy helped Harold change his clothes and made him sit near the wood stove to warm up. People came, one by one, to thank him, not just for rescuing the girl, but for warning about the flood, for knocking on doors, for caring. "You've done more in 2 weeks here than many do in years," said Miss Betty, handing him a mug of hot coffee. "The village won't forget this." But Harold barely heard the praise. His eyes were fixed on Dorothy, who was sitting beside him, holding his hand. During those minutes in the water, when he didn't know if he could save the girl, when he didn't know if he himself would survive, he had thought of her, of how she had believed in him when no one else did, of how she had chosen to stay by his side even when he had lied by omission about his past. "Dorothy," he said softly, just for her to hear, "I'm sorry, for hiding where I was from, for not trusting you with the truth. You deserved to know." "I know why you didn't tell," she replied, "and I understand. But there can't be any more secrets between us, Harold. Not after all this. There won't be, I promise." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they stayed like that, in silence, while the storm outside finally began to pass. But if the storm in the village was passing, another was just beginning in Chicago. Emma had found the letters. She was playing in the attic, a place her mother had told her not to go, but she was curious and wanted to find her old toys. It was there that she found an old box, full of papers and photographs. The photographs were mostly from her father's childhood. Little Michael smiling, Michael at school, Michael at birthday parties. And in all of them, her grandparents were there. Grandma Dorothy always hugging Michael with a radiant smile. Grandpa Harold more serious, but with his hand on his son's shoulder, proud. Emma looked at the letters. There were many of them, handwritten with neat handwriting that she recognized as Grandma's. She couldn't read very well yet, but she could make out some words. "Dear son, miss you. Love. Proud." "Emma? What are you doing up there?" Jennifer's voice came from the stairs. "Mommy, I found Grandma's letters." Jennifer quickly went up. When she saw the open box and the letters in Emma's hands, her face turned pale. "Leave that here. It's not for you to touch." "But why did Daddy keep Grandma's letters up here? Why aren't they downstairs where he can read them?" "Emma, I said leave that there." "Mommy, when are Grandma and Grandpa coming back?" Jennifer hesitated. She looked at the letters, at the photographs, at her daughter's hopeful face, and for the first time since Michael had left his parents in the village, she felt the weight of what they had done. They're not coming back, Emma." "Why? Don't they like us anymore?" "It's not that. It's just..." They're fine where they are. In a quiet place with fresh air close to nature. But I want to see them. I miss Grandma. She made me laugh. And Grandpa always told me stories. Jennifer felt a pang of guilt. She had insisted so much that Michael get rid of his parents. She had pressured, argued that they were a burden. But looking at her daughter now, seeing the sadness in her eyes, she wondered if she had done the right thing. "Let's put these letters away and go downstairs," she said, taking the box. "Can I keep a picture?" asked Emma. Jennifer looked at the photographs. She picked one where Dorothy was hugging a little Michael, both smiling at the camera. "You can keep this one." Emma took the photo carefully, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Jennifer watched her go down the stairs, the photo pressed against her chest. Alone in the attic, she opened one of the letters and began to read. "Dear Michael, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. Your father and I are doing fine. Don't worry about us. We know you're busy with work and family, but I wanted you to know that we're proud of you. You've built a good life. You have a beautiful wife and daughter. It's all we ever wanted for you." Jennifer stopped reading. She folded the letter quickly as if the words were burning her fingers. Those people, those elderly folks she had convinced Michael to abandon, weren't just a burden, a problem to be solved. They were human beings who loved their son, who cared, who had never asked for anything more than to be close to family. And they had left them in an unfamiliar village, without money, without documents, without anything. Jennifer went down the stairs slowly. Michael was in the living room working on his laptop. He had been quieter these past few weeks, more distant. She knew he was struggling with guilt, but chose to ignore it, hoping time would heal the wound. "Michael," she said, entering the room, "we need to talk." He looked up, surprised by the serious tone in her voice. "About what?" "About your parents. About what we did." Michael closed the laptop slowly. "I don't want to talk about this now." "Well, I do. Emma found the letters your mother sent you. She's asking when her grandparents are coming back." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her they're not coming back." "But Michael, have you ever stopped to think about what we really did? We abandoned your parents who raised you, who loved you, who supported you. And why? To renovate a house that was already fine? To have nicer furniture? It wasn't just for that, and you know it. Then what was it for? Because it was more convenient? Because it was easier for us?" Michael stood up, running his hands through his hair. "Because I didn't know how to take care of them anymore. They were old, needing more attention, more care. And I didn't have the time, I didn't have the patience. You yourself were always complaining about having to look after them. I know, and I was wrong, completely wrong." Michael looked at his wife, surprised. She had never admitted this before. "Emma is suffering," Jennifer continued. "She misses them, and honestly, I miss them too. Your mother helped me with the house, with Emma. She was good to me, even when I didn't deserve it. And your father, he can be tough, but he always respected our space, never interfered where he wasn't invited. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I read one of the letters, and it made me realize that we didn't just lose two old people we took care of out of obligation. We lost two people who truly loved us, and worse, we hurt them deliberately." Michael sat on the couch, his head in his hands. "I know that. Do you think I don't think about that every day? Do you think I don't see my father's face every time I close my eyes? That look, it wasn't even anger, it was resignation. As if he had been expecting that his whole life. Then let's go get them back." "What?" "Let's go there and bring them back home. We apologize, we try to fix things. What if they don't want to come back? What if they hate me for what I did? You'll never know if you don't try." Michael was silent for a long time. Jennifer waited, watching the internal struggle happening in her husband's mind. "I'll go," he said finally, "but I'll go alone first. I need to see how they are, if they're okay, and then we'll see." "When will you go?" "Tomorrow. There's no use putting it off any longer." But the next day, Michael didn't go, nor the day after, nor the next. There was always an excuse. Urgent work, an important meeting. Emma was sick. Jennifer realized what was happening. He was afraid. Afraid to face what he had done, afraid of rejection, afraid to find out he had hurt his parents beyond repair. So she made a decision. Without telling Michael, she hired a boatman and went to the village. The trip was long and uncomfortable. The boat was small, and the river was still rough, remnants of the recent flood. Jennifer clung to the sides, nauseous and scared, wondering for the 1,000th time if she was doing the right thing. When they finally reached the riverside village, the boatman pointed to the inn up high. "That's where most of the people who come from outside live," he said. "If your in-laws are here, they're probably there." Jennifer paid the man and started walking up the village's main street. People looked at her curiously. A city woman, with expensive clothes and high heels sinking into the mud, was definitely something unusual there. She knocked on the inn's door. A woman with grey hair answered, looking at her suspiciously. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for Harold and Dorothy Thompson. I was told they might be here." "Who's asking?" I'm their daughter-in-law." Miss Betty's face hardened. "Oh, the daughter-in-law. You've got some nerve showing up here. I know that we did a terrible thing, but I need to see them. I need to know if they're okay." "They're fine without your help." "Please, I just want to see them." Miss Betty studied her face for a moment, then stepped aside. "They're out back, in the yard. But I'm warning you, if you came here to hurt them again, you'll have to go through me first." Jennifer nodded and went in. The inn was simple but clean. She followed Miss Betty's directions and went to the back of the house. In the yard, she saw Dorothy hanging clothes on the line. The elderly woman looked thinner than Jennifer remembered, her face more tired. Her hands trembled slightly as she hung up a shirt. Jennifer felt a lump in her throat. "Mrs. Dorothy," she called out. Dorothy turned around. When she saw who it was, the cloth she was holding fell from her hands. "Jennifer. Hi, I came to see how you're doing." Dorothy didn't answer right away. She just looked at her daughter-in-law, a mix of emotions crossing her face: surprise, hope, pain. "Is Michael with you?" she asked finally. "No, he doesn't know I'm here." The hope on Dorothy's face faded. "Then why did you come?" "Because I needed to see with my own eyes. I needed to know if you were okay, and because I know what we did was terrible and I need to apologize. Apologies don't bring back the lost time, Jennifer. They don't give back the dignity that was taken from us. I know, but it's all I have to offer right now." Harold appeared then, coming from the other side of the yard with a bucket of water. When he saw Jennifer, he stopped. His face became impassive, but Jennifer could see the tension in his shoulders. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice icy. "I came to apologize, and to see if you need anything." "Now you care if we need anything. Where was that concern weeks ago?" "Harold," began Dorothy. "No, Dorothy. She has no right to come here now, pretending to care, when she was the one who convinced my son to abandon us here." "You're right," said Jennifer. "I don't have that right. It was my fault. I pressured Michael. I convinced him it was better this way. And I was completely wrong." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "And now?" asked Harold. "Did you come here to take us back? To clear your conscience?" "I came to see how you're doing, and to say that if you want to come back, you're welcome. The house is yours too." "The house?" Harold gave a bitter laugh. "That house you renovated with the money that should have been used to take care of us. That house where we were treated like a burden, like a problem." "Harold, please," said Dorothy, touching his arm. "She came all the way here. That has to mean something." "It means she has a guilty conscience, that's all." Jennifer felt small under Harold's accusing gaze. She deserved every word, every accusation. But there was something more she needed to say. "Emma is asking for you," she said softly. "Every day. She found the letters, the photos, and she asks when her grandparents are coming back." The mention of their granddaughter made Dorothy close her eyes. Tears began to stream down her face. "How is she?" she asked, her voice breaking. "She's sad. She misses you. Misses the cakes you used to bake, the stories you used to tell. She still doesn't understand why you left. And what did you tell her? Asked Harold. The truth, that you're in a faraway place and won't be back soon. And my son? Dorothy's voice was small, almost childlike. How is he? Jennifer thought about how to answer. Michael was destroyed, eaten up by guilt, barely able to sleep, but she wasn't sure if she should say that. He's dealing with things, she finally said. Dealing, Harold repeated with contempt. He abandons his own parents and is dealing with things. How convenient. He's afraid, said Jennifer. Afraid to come here and face you. Afraid to find out he's hurt you too much to be forgiven. He should be afraid, said Harold. But you know what's worse. I understand why he did it, because I did the same thing to my father when I was his age. Jennifer looked confused. Dorothy explained. Harold is from here, from this village. He ran away many years ago after breaking with his own father. I didn't know. No one did, said Harold. Not even my wife until we came here. I hid my past, my choices, my pain, and I ended up raising my son the same way my father raised me, with strictness, with distance, with the idea that being strong means not showing emotions. He sat in an old chair near the back door, suddenly looking exhausted. And now I'm paying the price, just like my father did. The difference is, he was lucky enough not to live long enough to feel the full weight of what he did. I'll have to carry this for the rest of my life. Dorothy sat beside her husband, taking his hand. You're not alone in this, she said. We carry it together. Jennifer watched the two of them. Despite everything they'd been through, they still had each other. There was a strength in that bond that she and Michael had never managed to build. What are you going to do? She asked. Will you stay here? We don't have much choice, said Dorothy. We don't have money to go anywhere, and here at least we have work, a roof over our heads. I can give you money, to go back, or to go wherever you want. We don't want your charity, Harold said firmly. It's not charity. It's the least I can do. The answer is no. Jennifer realized it was no use insisting. Harold's pride was unshakable. She stayed there a while longer, trying to talk, but the answers were short, the atmosphere tense. Finally, she said goodbye. If you change your mind about anything, please let me know, she said, leaving a paper with her phone number. And when I come back, I'll bring Emma. She deserves to see her grandparents, even if her grandparents don't want to see her father. That touched something in Dorothy. She took the paper, storing it carefully. Bring her, she said. I really want to see her. Jennifer nodded and left. The trip back was as uncomfortable as the trip there, but this time she barely noticed. Her mind was full of images. Harold, thin and tired, Dorothy with trembling hands, the two of them living in a strange village, working to survive. And all because of her. Because of her ambition, her desire to have a perfect home, to live a life without burdens. When she got home, Michael was waiting. He had found out she had gone. How could you go without telling me? He was furious. Because you were never going to go. You'd keep putting it off, making excuses until it was too late. And how were they? Jennifer looked at her husband and decided to hold nothing back. They were thin, tired, working as servants just to have a place to sleep. Your father can barely look ahead without his shoulders seeming to carry the weight of the world. Your mother's hands are shaking, probably from overwork. And both of them are just surviving, Michael. They're not living. They're surviving. Michael sank into the couch. Did they agree to come back? Your father refused. Said he doesn't want our charity. But your mother wants to see Emma. She asked me to bring Emma to her. No. Emma won't see them like that. I won't traumatize my daughter. Traumatize? Michael, you already traumatized your daughter by taking her grandparents away without explanation. Emma deserves to see that they're okay, that they still love her, and they deserve to see their granddaughter. I need to think. You've already thought too much. Now you need to act. But acting was harder than it seemed. The days passed and Michael couldn't make a decision. Until one night Emma had a nightmare. She woke up crying, screaming that Grandma had fallen into the river and no one was saving her. Michael rocked her until she calmed down, But when she finally fell back asleep, he sat in the dark of her room, looking at his daughter, thinking. He had lost his father by choice. He had pushed away the one person who should have been closest. And now he was making his daughter go through the same pain, the same loss. The next morning, he told Jennifer, "Pack our things. We're going to the village, all three of us, and we're bringing my parents back, whether they want to or not." The journey was long. Emma was excited, talking non-stop about what she would say to her grandparents, about all the things she had to tell them. But Michael was silent, mentally rehearsing what he would say, how he would apologize, how he would explain the inexplicable. When they finally reached the village, the sun was setting. Miss Betty's inn had its lights on, and they could see people on the porch. The village seemed different from what Michael remembered, more alive somehow. "Is this where Grandma and Grandpa live?" asked Emma, looking around curiously. "Yes," replied Jennifer. "Come on, let's go find them." They walked up to the inn. Miss Betty greeted them at the door, her gaze moving from Jennifer to Michael and then to Emma. "So you're the son," she said, no warmth in her voice. "Yes, I've come to get my parents. They're not your property to collect whenever you want." "I know, but I came anyway. Where are they?" "At the party. The village is celebrating." "Celebrating what?" "Come see for yourself." She led them behind the inn, where the entire village seemed to be gathered. There was music, people dancing, tables with food, and in the center of it all, Michael saw his parents. Harold was talking with a group of men, laughing at something someone had said. Dorothy was with the women helping serve the food. Both looked happy, integrated, as if they belonged there. "Grandma, Grandpa!" shouted Emma, letting go of Michael's hand and running toward her grandparents. Emma's shout cut through all the conversations. The music stopped. Everyone turned to see the girl running and the couple who had arrived behind her. Dorothy dropped the plate she was holding. Her hands flew to her face, tears instantly filling her eyes. "Emma," she whispered. The girl threw herself into her grandmother's arms, hugging her tightly. Dorothy knelt, wrapping her granddaughter in a tight embrace, crying openly. "Grandma, I missed you so much," Emma whimpered. "Why did you leave?" "I didn't want to go, my love. I didn't want to." Harold had approached too. Emma let go of Dorothy and hugged her grandfather, who lifted her off the ground despite his arms trembling with the effort. Michael stood frozen a few meters away, watching. His father hadn't looked at him yet. Dorothy also avoided his gaze, all her attention focused on her granddaughter. "Dad," Michael finally said, his voice hoarse. "Mum, I came to get you." Harold finally looked at his son. His face was a mask, impossible to read. "Get?" he repeated. "Like you'd get something that was dropped by the wayside?" "Dad, I know I have no excuse for what I did. I know what I did was terrible, unforgivable. But I came to ask for forgiveness anyway, and to ask you to come back home." "Home," said Harold, his voice bitter. "That was never my home. It was your home. We only lived there because you allowed it. It wasn't like that." "Yes, it was. And you know it. We were always walking on eggshells, trying not to be a bother, trying not to be a burden. And in the end, it didn't matter, because you threw us out anyway." The words were harsh, but Harold's voice was broken. Michael could see the tears forming in his father's eyes, tears he was fighting to hold back. "Dad, please. 43 years, Michael. 43 years your mother and I raised you, loved you, supported every decision you made. And in the end, what was it worth? You brought us here to the place I ran away from over 40 years ago, and you left us, without an explanation, without dignity, without anything. I was confused. I was under pressure. I didn't know what to do anymore. So you abandoned us, just like I did with my father." The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone in the riverside village was listening now, witnessing this family confrontation. "I know that story," said Michael. "Mum told me, and I understand now. I understand why you raised me the way you did, because you were afraid I would become weak, that I would choose the easy way out." "And you did," said Harold. "You chose the easy way out. You chose to get rid of us instead of dealing with what was difficult." And didn't you do the same thing? Didn't you run away from your father instead of fighting? Harold stopped. Michael's words had hit their mark. I ran away, he admitted after a moment, because my father gave me no choice. It was run away or lose the woman I loved. But at least I had the decency to do it to his face, to tell him what I was doing. You didn't. You lied, said you were taking us on an outing, and you abandoned us like we were trash. I know, shouted Michael, his own voice breaking now. I know what I did. And that's why I'm here. Because I can't live with it anymore. Because every time I close my eyes, I see your face that day. That look of giving up. And I can't take it anymore. So you came here to feel better? To clear your conscience? No. I came because I need my parents back. Because Emma needs her grandparents. Because I realized too late that family isn't a burden. It's all we truly have in this world. Dorothy, who had been silent holding Emma, finally spoke. Michael, her voice was soft but firm, what you did hurt us deeply. It's not something you forget or forgive easily, but you are my son, and you always will be. The question is, have you really changed? Or are you here just because the guilt is too heavy to carry? Michael looked at his mother, at his father, at his daughter, and then he did the only thing he could do. He knelt. I've changed, he said, tears finally falling freely. Or at least I'm trying to change. I know words aren't enough. I know it will take time. But please give me a chance. Give us a chance to fix this. For us to be a real family. Harold looked at his kneeling son. There were so many emotions crossing his face. Anger, pain, resentment. But there was also something else. Something he had buried for a long time. Love. He looked at Dorothy, who nodded slightly. Then he looked at Emma, who was clinging to her grandmother's skirts, her eyes going from her father to her grandfather, confused but hopeful. And finally he looked back at Michael. Get up, he said. Michael rose slowly. Harold took a step forward, then another, until he was face to face with his son. It'll take time, said Harold, and it won't be easy. But maybe we can find a way. Michael let out a sob of relief. He extended his arms, waiting, asking for permission. Harold hesitated for just a second before accepting the hug. Father and son embraced while the entire village watched. It wasn't a hug of complete reconciliation, it was just a beginning. But sometimes a beginning is all we need. Dorothy joined the hug, and Emma too, turning it into a family reunion. Jennifer stood a little apart, tears in her own eyes. Miss Betty approached her. You did the right thing bringing him here, she said. I just hope it's not too late. It's never too late. Not as long as there's true love. And looking at that family there, I'd say there's plenty of true love. But even as the family hugged, there was still something that needed to be resolved. After some time, Harold pulled away. Michael, there's something you need to know, he said. Dorothy and we're not coming back. What? But I thought, we're staying here, in this village. Miss Betty offered us the chance to run the inn when she retires. We have work here, purpose. The community has accepted us. For the first time in a long time, we feel at home. Michael looked around, at the village people who had welcomed them, at the inn where his parents now lived, at the river that had witnessed so much of the family's history. But what about Emma and us? Won't you see us anymore? Don't say that, replied Dorothy. You'll visit us, every week if possible. Bring Emma, spend the weekend here. We'll have time together, real time, not just a few stolen minutes between appointments. And maybe, added Harold, maybe the distance will be good for us to rebuild our relationship on new, healthier foundations. Michael wanted to argue, wanted to insist they come back, but looking at his parents' faces, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Peace. They were at peace. Okay, he said finally. We'll come every weekend, and during vacations, Emma can stay here with you if she wants. I want to, exclaimed Emma. Grandma can teach me how to make cake, and Grandpa can take me fishing. We'll see about the fishing, said Harold, but there was a smile on his face. They stayed in the village for 3 more days. Michael worked alongside his father, fixing things around the inn and the village houses. They talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Harold told about his youth, about the grandfather Michael never knew, about the choices he had made and the regrets he carried. Michael, in turn, opened up about his own insecurities, about how he always felt he was never good enough in his father's eyes, about how that feeling had led him to make terrible decisions. "You were always good enough," said Harold in one of these conversations, while they were fixing a fence. "The problem was me. I was so worried about making you strong that I forgot to make you happy. You did the best you could. But it wasn't good enough, was it? And now we're here, trying to fix years of damage in a few days." "We have time," said Michael. "We'll have all the time in the world if we choose to." It was a promise, one that Michael intended to keep. Dorothy spent those days with Emma and Jennifer. She taught Emma how to make bread, to identify medicinal plants, to listen to the sounds of the river. And she talked at length with Jennifer, not just about what had happened, but about everything. About marriage, about family, about the choices we make and how we live with them. "I don't know if I can fully forgive her," said Dorothy in one of those conversations. "Maybe one day, but what you did by coming here, by bringing Michael, by admitting you were wrong, that meant a lot." "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up," promised Jennifer. "I don't want you to spend your life punishing yourself. I want you to learn from this and be a better person. That's all anyone can do." On the last day, the Riverside Village organized a farewell. It wasn't a big party, but there was food, music, and plenty of conversation. Michael met the people who had welcomed his parents, who had treated them with kindness when he himself had abandoned them. The shame he felt was profound, but he thanked each one of them. "Take good care of them," Miss Betty said to Michael. "They're good people, hard-working, honest. They don't deserve to be treated like trash again." "Never again," promised Michael. "That will never happen again." When it was finally time to leave, Emma didn't want to go. She clung to her grandparents, crying, begging to stay. "You'll be back soon," promised Dorothy, hugging her tight. "In 2 weeks. Your father promised." "Do you promise, Daddy?" asked Emma. "I promise," said Michael. And this time, it was a promise he knew he would keep. The boat slowly pulled away from the shore. Dorothy and Harold kept waving until it disappeared around the bend in the river. Then, hand in hand, they returned to the Gentle River Inn. "Do you think he'll really come back?" asked Dorothy. "I think so," replied Harold. "He's changed. You can see it in his eyes. That pain, that guilt. He'll carry it for the rest of his life. And maybe that's a good thing. It will remind him of what's important. I just hope we're not making a mistake by staying here. We're not. For the first time in a long time, I feel free. Free from the past, free from expectations, free to just be myself. And you too. We can rebuild our life here the way we want." Dorothy smiled, squeezing her husband's hand. 43 years together, and we're still learning new things about each other. I hope we have at least another 43 ahead of us. They went back to work. There was always something to do at the inn, but now it was different. They weren't working out of obligation or desperate need. They were working because they chose to, because it was their home, because it was their life. And for the first time since the boat had pulled away that grey afternoon, leaving them alone and scared on the riverbank, they felt truly happy. 2 weeks later, as promised, Michael returned. He brought Emma, Jennifer, and also brought gifts, new tools for Harold, beautiful fabrics for Dorothy, toys to share with the village children. But the best gift was time. They spent the whole weekend together, talking, laughing, rebuilding the bonds that had been broken. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkward silence, moments where the old wounds still hurt. But there was also love, genuine and true. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. The months passed. The visits became a routine. Michael and the family came every weekend, sometimes bringing friends, other times just the 4 of them. Emma grew up adoring the village, loving spending time with her grandparents, learning about a simpler life. Harold and Michael worked side by side, Not just fixing things, but fixing their relationship. They talked about everything. About the past, about regrets, about hopes for the future. Slowly, painfully, but steadily, they rebuilt what had been broken. Dorothy and Jennifer grew closer too. Jennifer learned to cook with her mother-in-law. They shared stories, laughed together. The hurt was still there, but it was fading, replaced by something stronger. And Miss Betty? She watched it all with satisfaction. She had seen many families pass through her inn over the years, many stories of pain and separation, but she rarely saw a story of true reconciliation. "You are lucky," she said one evening to Harold and Dorothy, while the three drank coffee in the kitchen after Michael and the family had already left. "Why?" asked Dorothy. "Because not everyone gets a second chance. Not everyone has the opportunity to rebuild what was broken. You have that. Use it well." And they did. Every day, every week, every visit, they worked to be better, to understand each other more, to love more deeply. The river kept flowing as it always had. The seasons changed, bringing rains and sunshine, floods and droughts. The village continued its simple and peaceful life. And in the inn at the top of the hill, a family learned that true love is not the kind that never faces difficulties. It is the kind that faces difficulties and chooses, every day, to fight for reconciliation. Years later, when Emma was a young adult, she would bring her own children to visit their great-grandparents in the village, and Harold, now much older but still strong in spirit, would tell them about how it all began. About the day he was abandoned on that riverbank, about how what seemed to be the end was actually a new beginning. "Life is full of fresh starts," he would tell his great-grandchildren, with Dorothy seated by his side, their hands intertwined as they always were. "And sometimes the worst moments lead us to the most beautiful places, but only if we have the courage to forgive, the courage to rebuild, the courage to love even when it's hard." And the children would listen, not fully understanding yet, but keeping those words in their hearts. Because one day they would need them too. Because that is the nature of life. It hurts us, breaks us, leaves us on the riverbank not knowing what to do. But it also gives us the chance to start over, to be better, to turn our pain into something beautiful and true. And in the end, perhaps that is what matters most, not what happened to us, but what we choose to do with what happened to us. Harold and Dorothy chose forgiveness. Michael chose redemption. Jennifer chose change. Emma chose love. And together they chose to be a family, an imperfect, hurt, but real family. And in the end, what more could a family be? The years kept passing. The inn prospered under the care of Dorothy and Harold, who eventually bought it from Miss Betty when she decided to finally retire. They ran it with love and dedication, making it not just a place to sleep, but a home for tired travelers and wounded souls. Michael never missed a single visit, not one. Even when work got heavy, even when he was tired, he always found time to come to the village, because he had learned in the hardest way possible that family is not something you put in the background. It's what you prioritize, always. And Jennifer, she became one of Dorothy's best friends. The daughter-in-law, who once pushed for the family's separation, was now the one organizing gatherings, making sure everyone was cared for, keeping the family together. But not everything was easy. There were setbacks, moments where old wounds reopened. There were arguments, tears, nights where they seemed to be back at the beginning. But always, always, they chose forgiveness. They chose love. They chose to keep trying. And in that, they found not just reconciliation, but something deeper. They found a true family, built not just on blood and tradition, but on daily choices of love and forgiveness. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story. Were you moved? Did Harold and Dorothy make the right decision by staying in the village? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. And don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories. Thanks for your company.